Impressionism was an artistic movement with an influence that was felt across the world. In South Africa, in the first half of the 20th century, a number of artists who were influenced by Impressionism in their treatment of the South African landscape became known as the Cape Impressionists. Cape Impressionism was not a formalized artistic school or movement, or even a grouping of artists around an agreed program or set of principles. It was more a matter of shared aims and influences. The 20th century South African art historian Esmé Berman defined Cape Impressionism as a term that gained wide currency among critics in the years around World War II. It applies to a general style of South African painting, which is indirectly and derivatively related to the techniques of European Impressionism, and which has enjoyed its most consistent exposition in the Cape. So this gives us three elements of Cape Impressionism, a mid-20th century time frame, the essential but also indirect and derivative influence of European Impressionism, and a geographical association with the Western Cape, reflecting both the qualities of the regional landscape and climate, which many artists found more appropriate to an Impressionist approach than the barer and more elemental landscapes of the interior, and the predominant role of Cape Town as a centre for the arts in late 19th and early 20th century South Africa. The Cape Impressionist artists were reacting against an artistic culture in South Africa which was insular and conservative, and looked to the academic tradition of European fine art, and particularly to the British and Dutch old masters. South Africa lacked a distinctive artistic culture of its own, and was slow to develop the infrastructure and institutions which would nurture and sustain such a culture. South Africa, it was believed, would in due course evolve an art of its own under the influence of the great European art traditions to which it was the heir. Gradually, art collections and galleries were established to make that tradition visible and available in South Africa. The South African National Gallery was founded in Cape Town in 1895, the Johannesburg Art Gallery opened in 1910, and the Michaelis collection of Dutch paintings opened to the public in Cape Town in 1913. The bringing together of Dutch and English old masters in South Africa having particular symbolic significance in the aftermath of the South African War. These early South African galleries organized their collections under national schools, the British School, the French School, the Dutch School. There was no provision for any South African school, for the prevailing assumption was that no such thing existed. But, inspired by the great European masterpieces, South Africans would develop an artistic tradition of their own. South Africans must derive all their civilization and all their art, if they are to have any, from Europe, declared the Times in 1912. As they take European minds with them to their new home, so they must take European culture, if they are to achieve a great civilization of their own. Conservative academicism accordingly prevailed in South African visual art. Landscape painting, such as that of the influential artist James Smith Morland, followed the established canons of picturesque British landscape art. Edward Roworth, a dominant figure in the arts in South Africa in the first half of the 20th century, was, like Morland, born in England, and was thoroughly Anglo-centric in his art and his attitudes. In 1917 he declared that there is no such thing as a school of South African landscape painting. His own very popular paintings of South African landscapes and farmhouses were firmly in the British tradition, while in his institutional roles, which included the directorship of the South African National Gallery, he opposed modern art and exerted a strong traditionalist influence. But there was, from the early 20th century, an alternative tradition in South African painting, rooted not in past but in contemporary European art, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and Expressionism. Artists who were trained in Europe and had been exposed to the latest tendencies came to South Africa with fresh eyes and a new sense of artistic possibilities. One important early figure was Nita Spilhaus, who was born in Lisbon in 1878 to a Portuguese mother and German father, and settled in Cape Town in 1907 after studying art in Lübeck and Munich. She became closely involved in the artistic community at the Cape, befriending, influencing, and being influenced by many of the leading artists of the period. In 1925 she married and settled in Munich, only returning to South Africa after the Second World War, by which time her eyesight was failing. Her work was mainly in landscapes, in the form of paintings and etchings. She brought Impressionist influences to her interpretations of the landscapes around the Cape, creating works that not only represented the scene before her, but evoked feeling and atmosphere. Let's compare Nita Spielhaus's view of Camps Bay, undated but probably painted around 1920, with James Smith Morland's painting of almost precisely the same view from 20 years earlier. Morland's painting is framed according to the established canons of traditional European landscape painting, with a stable viewpoint, a clear horizon, and a careful balancing of forms and of land, sea, and sky. Spielhaus's viewpoint lacks the sense of stability. The view into the bay is precipitous, suggesting not only the visual but the physical experience of looking down upon a view from an elevated position. No horizon is visible, just the expanse of sea stretching to the top of the canvas. Spielhaus has used the Impressionist technique, derived from Japanese prints, of raising the ground plane so that it fills the whole picture space. Morland's palette is naturalistic, with smoothly modulated tones and carefully blended brushstrokes, while Spielhaus uses heightened colours applied in broken and vigorous dabs and streaks. Morland's picture is highly finished, suitable for the drawing room or the salon, very different from Spielhaus's conscious use of a rougher technique, unconcerned with smoothness or uniformity of finish. More than these technical aspects of composition and colouring, there is an atmosphere to Spielhaus's work that is absent from Morland's. Morland's painting not only follows the rules of British landscape art, it could almost be a British scene, a view over the English Channel perhaps. Spielhaus has sought to give her image a distinctly African flavour, true to the setting and atmosphere in its heightened colour and sense of light and space. Spielhaus painted in the open air, and in pictures such as this, she seeks to share with the viewer that experience of direct, unmediated engagement with the landscape. Spielhaus, as I mentioned earlier, was part of a community of artists in the Cape Town area who shared the aim of bringing to the landscape art of South Africa an authentically South African quality. These artists can be seen as the first generation of Cape Impressionists. Notable among them was Pieter Venning, a self-taught artist born in the Netherlands in 1873, who came to South Africa in 1905 to work for a bookseller. He initially lived in Pretoria and Johannesburg, where his circumstances and those of his family were difficult, but he was always active as an artist and made many artistic contacts. It was with the support of artist friends in the Cape that Venning came to settle in Cape Town in 1916, and he was able to make a name for himself as an innovative and powerful landscapist before his life was cut short by ill health. He died of tuberculosis in 1921. His works are characterized by spontaneity and vigor, expressed in energetic brushstrokes, the use of blocks of vivid color, and asymmetrical compositions that reflect his interest in Japanese prints, as well as the works of both French and Dutch Impressionists. He worked in the open air, but also made extensive use of preparatory sketches, which he worked up into finished paintings in the studio. He was motivated by the desire to capture transient atmospheric effects and the distinctive qualities of light and colour to be found in the South African landscape, both urban and rural. Another key artist in bringing Impressionist influences to South Africa was Strat Caldicott. Like Venning, his career was curtailed by illness. Caldecott was born in Kimberley in 1886 and died of cancer, aged just 43, in 1929. Before the First World War, and again in the 1920s, he lived and studied in Paris, and became intimately familiar with Impressionism, and incorporated not only its techniques but its principles into his painting. He sought visual integrity, the accurate rendering in paint of the light and atmosphere of the scene before him. The strong French influence on his work can be seen in his Cape landscapes and his vibrant sketches of scenes such as this Cape Town street at the time of the visit of the Prince of Wales in 1925. Caldecott applied French Impressionist techniques to South African subjects, but it took another artist to transform Impressionist techniques and approaches in a distinctively South African way. Hugo Naudé was born on a farm in the Western Cape in 1869, and the landscapes of that region inspired him throughout his life. Like so many promising young South African artists, he went away to Europe to study, enrolling first at the Slade in London, before moving on to Munich and then to France, where he worked among the landscape painters of the Barbizon school in the 1890s. On his return to South Africa, he worked mainly as a portraitist in the academic realist style he had learned in Munich, but increasingly it was landscape, painted en plein air, that became his characteristic subject. His early works are more conventional, using traditional European landscape composition and the subdued palette of the Barbizon school, but a comparison of this work of 1906 with this one from 1940 indicates the ways in which his approach to landscape changed. He evoked the light and sunshine of the Cape landscape through vivid colour, given vibrancy through energetic, loose but rhythmic brushstrokes. Spontaneity was vital to Naudé, and he always tried to capture the scene before him in a single sitting. His depictions of the Cape region became very popular and shaped the way that landscape was seen throughout the 20th century. But the popularity of his work should not distract from its radicalism. In bringing Impressionist-influenced plein-air techniques, freedom in paint handling, and potent evocation of the qualities of light to bear on the vividly coloured and sunlight-drenched landscapes of South Africa, Hugo Naudé gave to Cape Impressionism its fullest meaning, and perhaps its most successful expression. The evolution of Cape Impressionism in later generations of 20th century South African painters will be considered in the second part of this video.